the Countryside Podcasts with Chris Skinner.
Grey overcast morning right at the end of November. It's been quite cold here in the last few days, but actually mild this morning. And we're in Fox's Grove, Chris.
Yes, so you got the hang of the name of all the woodlands on the farm now, Matthew. Well done after all this time. Yes, we're right on the southern edge of this 30-acre area of woodland. And it's a little bit different this morning because it's been quite gloomy standing here because the trees just a week ago, or maybe a little bit more, had a full sort of canopy of leaves above us, and now the leaves are really on the woodland floor. It's sort of a mixture of golds and browns, all sorts of colours, and the light level in the woodland has suddenly increased, and it kind of defies logic because in about 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, we've got the shortest day, which is the longest night. At the moment, this week, from Sunday to next Sunday, we're going to lose 13 minutes more daylight in the course of a week. And the following week after that, just 7 minutes of daylight. And the next week, which would be the 21st of December, that's the shortest day, no daylight loss. And then it starts to increase again, very gradually, the other side of the shortest day. But in Norfolk, there's a lot of sort of pessimists about, because the locals would say, well, boy, Skinner, when the days get shorter, the cold gets stronger. Yes.
That is accurate, though, isn't it? Because our worst weather here is January, February, isn't it?
It is, in terms of the cold weather, yes. But the last few winters we've been spared, really, and got away with out too much levels of snow on the farm, which always makes it difficult. Anyway, we're standing on a very interesting spot right where we are on the southern edge of the farm. You can see there's a little bit of a depression in the ground in front of this old ash tree in front of us, and why that's important is a bomb landed there in the Second World War and it didn't go off. So
I just moved back slightly.
It was a huge hole which stayed there until about 10 years ago, when I decided, because it's right by one of the permissive walks here at the farm, I decided to fill it back in and found about 15 tons of sand and filled the hole back in. The bomb was diffused and removed.
All those years ago?
Yes. So
80 odd years ago.
83 years ago, exactly. Now, on the tree that's just snapped off and fallen over, you can actually see carved in, it was UXB. And you can just still see, if we stand away from it, you can see the B just here.
There it is.
Look.
Oh my word, and that tree's a goner. And
yes, the tree is, so it landed just 6 feet away from the tree.
UXB, yes. Unexploded bomb.
Yes, there we are. Yeah, so absolutely incredible. Now, what happened here is the German bombers flew in almost from the south of High Ash Farm. They came in and they were after some of the sort of industrial parts of Norwich, particularly on the south side of Norwich. There were two very large work units there, one called Bolton and Paul and the other Lawrence and Scott's Electromotors, that were making parts for aeroplanes for the war, and the Germans wanted to take those out. So as they approached this area, just on some high ground about half a mile further south of us, on one of the fields on High Ash Farm, which we call to this day the gun field, there was a row of artillery weapons on the top of the hill overlooking Norwich, and in between each of those was a very large searchlight sort of shining up to try and bring those planes down. They knew Norwich would be attacked from the south. So this bomb that landed here, the first one of the string of bombs, it was pretty big. It was 1,000 pounds in weight and highly explosive, cast iron steel case on it. And the next bomb, which landed on the night meadow, just close to High Ash Farm farmhouse, It killed 2 of my father's working horses. Captain survived. Proctor and the other horse actually both got killed, and Captain, my father, kept going for about another 10 years. He had shrapnel in the back of his legs, so he couldn't work anymore. That was the beginning of the tractor era, so tractors were gradually replacing the horses back then. But the next bomb went off. Bang, close to the farmhouse. There are 2 cottages on the corner of the meadow. They were split down the middle with the impact, and some of the shrapnel came out and went into the farmhouse. My mum was pregnant at the time with my eldest sister, Pat, and although she hadn't given birth, a piece of shrapnel went through the farmhouse wall into what was to become my sister's bedroom. The ceiling came in and it went through an 18-inch thick brick wall. The farmhouse was built. Do you know what? I brought it with me.
Well, you brought the shrapnel. And there it is, huge lump of iron, a horrible looking sharp fragment.
Yes.
And you've got writing on there.
Yes, Second World War, Night Meadow, northwest corner, bomb fragment.
And that went through 18 inches.
Hit rear of farmhouse, and the date 1910-1942. And I've kept it all that time just to remind us that, you know, sometimes the world can be an unsettled place, and we often regard it far afield, you know, when you hear rumours of wars in other countries, and yet this landed on Hyash Farm, and it's incredibly sharp, and it probably weighs 3 kilos and fits. Just have a feel of the weight, Matthew.
Oh, wow. So, and that is just a
tiny
shard
of the bomb that went through.
And that is really heavy, isn't it?
Yes.
Sort of fits in your hand, but actually is really weighty.
It's like lead. It's cast steel is the best way to describe it. And you can see all the fragments. It was designed not just to go off and destroy a building or a property, but to fragment as well. So you have all these shards. So a little bit of history back then. But I brought us here because in the last few weeks we've had lots of questions on fungi. And last week we touched on a quite interesting fungus which foresters absolutely dread. It's called honey fungus, Armillaria malea. And normally we only see that fungus either with the bootlaces, which it can produce, which go under the bark. They just look like long black threads under the bark of dead trees, which you can peel off. They're called rhizomorphs, but they themselves are a product of something much more sinister, which is the invisible hyphae that grow from fungi, either in the ground or in trees, in woodland or in rotting vegetation. Normally it's microscopic and you can't see it, but I've just been cutting these trees down. I've done some health and safety here. Some of the trees further down in the wood have ash dieback and they've become unstable. So I've cut some up, and you can see this particular tree where the bomb landed next to it is completely rotten and hollow, and that's probably a result of the fungi that's affected the tree. And the next tree but one down, I've cut a cross section of it off, and here, and I've asked Laura Cuffin to take a photograph of it, you can actually see the black lines of the fungi spreading into the heartwood, and that's the bit you normally would never see. And it's a great big log, nice and solid, and it basically, you've got black lines that look almost artistic right in the centre of the tree.
It does look like someone's traced out like a butterfly
It
pattern.
does look like that,
2
doesn't
wings.
It? Yes, it does look like that. And then the hyphae has spread out, and it's got a special name for when this happens. The wood is infected heavily with the spores, and it's called spalting. Now, it's a great favourite with furniture makers and turners who make bowls and fruit bowls from it, because if you have spalted wood, it adds to the attraction to the colour of it, whereas the wood is still solid. It gives this wonderful pattern. So we should have on this week's High Ash Farm Facebook page, we should have a photograph of what we're actually looking at now.
And does that pattern go all the way through this
Right
section?
the way up the trunk. So right, it can go as high as the right top of the tree. So it's really quite invasive. Now, why it's important is that's how the fungus actually grows and spreads. But what it wants to do is reproduce, and that's the bit we normally see at this time of the year. We have lots of wonderful questions and photographs from people who are sending in images of all the different species of fungi. They're all quite specialist. Some choose particular tree species, some like a particular soil type, some just grow anywhere. And this honey fungus is one of the most common ones, and there it forms the big clumps of honey-coloured fungi on the outside of trees. Those little fungi have gills under them, and that's where the spores come out. The spores go off in the wind, land perhaps on another area of woodland, and infect perhaps another tree. So there's nothing you can do, because when you've got a good sound living tree, which there's many all around us, you cannot see this in the middle of the trunk. It's not visible from the outside. So that's why it's important, and gives you a little bit of clue how fungi sort of spread themselves about. And I've got a bit of a smile in my voice, although honey fungus is quite a serious problem. I'm just watching Rat, who's joined us this morning, the demented terrier, and he seems to be using his nose, which always fascinates me, because there's obviously been a long-tailed field mouse or something close to where the logs are laying there, and he's going along, and his tail is kind of a signal as to how close he is to whatever he's using his nose for. So he's really going around industriously looking. Oh, he trod on some a piece of thorn laying on the ground then, but he's carrying on work as he does, disregarding any pain. So there we are, quite an interesting little bit of history, the invisible side of fungi, which is really, really important and quite picturesque as well. So really fascinating time of year to watch all the different fungi species out in the countryside at the moment.
A couple of ladies on their horses, and we've been being serenaded, or I suppose that's the wrong word. There's been a bird warning us off all through our conversation.
Right, no, I was totally engrossed in talking about the fungi and the Second World War bomb. And yes, you have lots of sort of being sworn at. If we could interpret what the birds are saying, most of it would be unrepeatable. And I've been working here. When I stop the saw, occasionally have a coffee or a rest, then nearly always a green woodpecker will start up, because I'm working in their territory, and the trees all around us are absolutely full of woodpecker holes. So there we are. Right, a lovely little introduction to this week's Countryside Podcast.
Much more to come. Well, we've come a few hundred yards, and we're at the end of one of your lovely woodland rides here. Very attractive.
Matthew, is absolutely beautiful. We're on the northern edge of one of the belts of woodland that was planted about 150 years ago. It's called barn wood, because behind where we're standing, which later became sugar beet pad, was a whole series of old agricultural barns, and they got very dangerous. Most of them were made of clay block, and they got demolished about 25 years ago, and then the whole area was concreted, and that's why it's called barn wood, because it's next to a barn.
Well, we've got some log splitting going on there today.
Yes, there is. Yes, that's Neil's job at this time of the year. I'm busy always sawing any trees that have come down over the previous 12 months, and I log those. Most of the top gets chopped up and made into what we call bug banks. So lots of dead wood onto the woodland floor. You can see, if we look up through this area of woodland, all the branches and twigs there. Sometimes I lump them up, and then once the light gets back into the woodland, you have an understory starting to create, which is the brambles, and that's really good for holding the wildlife in there, and it's quite warm in there as well, and good habitat for the deer. Anyway, I've brought us here because something strange happened here during the earlier part of this week. Some strange fungi started to appear, and they're rather peculiar looking. So if we just walk in a little bit, they start off as a chicken egg stage, a white sort of gelatinous ball just on the surface of the soil, and if you did cut it in half, it would be just clear jelly, and right out in the middle of it would be the beginning of the fruiting body. Now, it's got a really unusual name. The common name is called a stinkhorn, and the scientific name is a bit more descriptive. It's called Phallus impudicus, which literally does mean a stinkhorn shaped like a phallus. Is the only way to describe it. It's one of the most extraordinary fungi. It grows about 3 inches an hour. Once the egg bursts and the fungi starts to emerge from it, it's almost, you can see it moving, and this sort of phallic shape emerges from the woodland floor.
And I can see at least 2 here, right on the edge of the woods.
Yes, and then something really strange happens, which I've never fully understood. The fungi emerge, and they're white at the moment because the spores have all disappeared, and it has a black slime on the top of the fungus. It's really extraordinary, and the impudicus part of the name literally is the stink part of the name, and it smells quite vile, to put it politely. It's pungent, and it carries for quite a distance through the woodland as well, and because of that it smells rather like a decaying corpse. Now, if we look at the right-hand fungi, most of the slime has come off the head of it, and can you see flies on there?
Oh yes. Oh,
Great
there's 5 or 6 big flies there, isn't there?
Look, there's more than that probably.
Like the sort of flies you get in the summer.
Yes, I managed to, because we're right at the end of November, it's December on Monday, and so you wouldn't expect this to happen, but what has happened is we've had some rainfall, the ground is still quite warm, and that's why a lot of the questions we're having this week and last week are all about fungi, because they're able to come out of the ground and emerge and complete their life cycle. So I'd never linked that black slime with this particular fungus way of distributing itself, and so that slime is the most important portion of the fungi's life, in that it contains all the spores. The fungus designed itself really cleverly to attract flies by this pungent smell, and it really does smell like rotting flesh.
We're not getting it today though, are we?
No, because the slime's all been eaten by the flies, and if we get down and have a, or I will do, I'll get down on my knees, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 very large flies. I managed to capture.
Oh, I've got
this.
it now.
Have you?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, I have, yes.
Yeah.
It's
The wind must have just shifted.
the waft of smell has just reached us, and it's nothing to how it was when it first emerged. And there's some flies right down at the base of it, because obviously some of the slime has run down. It sounds pretty awful to talk about it, and because it's not a very pleasant topic, but it's so clever because it's attracted the flies. The flies then, I've just got a second waft. I'm glad I know what that smell is.
It's not my aftershave.
No. Goodness me. So the flies then land on that slime and drink some of it, and they can excrete it as spores, but they also get the slime on their feet. They then fly off to another portion of the woodland, and of course that's exactly what this fungus wants the flies to do. You can start to see there's some, I wouldn't like to call fungi intelligent, but you can start to see the link that somehow this particular species of fungus, Phallus impudicus, has designed itself with the sort of really crimpled top to the fungus. It's all sort of, I don't know, it's almost like polystyrene and crimpled and can hold all the slime on it.
Yeah, it's a white colour, isn't it? And it's
Yes.
growing straight out of the ground.
Yes,
Ramrod straight up.
it is. Yes, and there's the remnants of the egg round the base of this one. You can still see the sort of orangey brown egg casing, but it was completely gelatinous and hollow, that egg, with this little sort of phallus growing out of it. But then it becomes quite large. It's about 6 to 7 inches tall and very symbolic in its shape. But that's fascinated me, how the fungus, because normally fungi, you have that dome shape, or a field mushroom, for instance, has the gills underneath. The Phallus species here, and there's two. This is Phallus impudicus. There's also a dog stinkhorn, which is slightly different and yellow in colour as well. They both spread their spores by this slime, so it's kind of top-trumped the gill mechanism of spore dispersal to rely on insects to do the job even better. It's absolutely amazing. I never sort of cease to, once you learn about nature and what those flies are doing, is exactly what the fungi is doing. In the same thing, there's a hawthorn bush right next to us with its berries on, bright red, and that's advertising itself for birds to come and eat the berries, because that's what it wants, and then the birds eat them. The seed in the centre of the little berry can't be digested in the bird's alimentary canal, so they get excreted out, but the bird has flown off, perhaps perched in a hedgerow somewhere, excretes the berry onto the ground, and that's what the hawthorn in this case actually wants it to do: start off a new site and spread its children through its seeds. So there we are. I'm fascinated by the
There's
things.
some quite small flies on there, little gnats.
Yes, there is. Yeah, there's tiny ones and large ones, and it doesn't matter because each of those flies can have 10, 15,000 spores on its feet, because the spores are microscopic, rather like the dust that we see under some fungi species. But there we are, a quick lesson in how to get yourself out and about. And if you just walk in here, just a fraction, just 20 yards into the woodland now, into the horse track.
So that was Phallus impudicus.
Yes. Now, this is Digitalis purpurea. We're going all Latin this morning. Now, look at this in front of us.
So from the
literally,
stinkhorn we go to, what's this?
this is foxglove, a really lovely woodland shaded species. In amongst all the young oak trees here, they're all ramrod straight, growing close to each other. They're all about 100, 120 years old, about a quarter of the way through their life probably. And because it's shaded here, foxgloves love this kind of habitat, and there's literally thousands of them spread through the woodland floor all the way up through this wood. This is going to be absolutely glorious. These plants would have been from seed in 2024. They've grown right through 2025. This particular one by our feet is probably 10, 12 inches across, and it will come into flower in late May, June 2026. So it's a biennial plant. Absolutely.
So this will be quite some display here, won't
Yes,
it?
right by one of the permissive walks and right up beside one of the horse tracks, spreading away as far as we can see in the distance.
Next summer.
Yes, so there we are. Because many people feel a bit sort of down in the mouth at this time of the year with the darker days and the long nights and colder weather. It's called SAD syndrome, seasonally affected disorder, and yet this is full of promise, and it kind of lifts the spirits, because sometimes you enjoy things more if you're waiting for them to occur rather than go and just get something straight off. I just love watching this and watching nature unfold itself, and you keep in touch with the seasons. We're lucky in this country because we have 4 very distinctive seasons. Some people regard December the 1st as the beginning of winter. Some people say, no, you've got to wait to December the 21st for the shortest day, and that's the beginning of winter. But to me, they kind of merge seamlessly from one season to the other. It doesn't actually happen on a particular day. So this is delightful, something great to look forward to.
Got plenty of emails in the post bag this week, so we will be answering one or two of those, or Chris will in a few moments. Also, a little bit of the farm is available these days as well, isn't it? In tea towel form.
Yes, Matthew. My son Daniel has had some towels printed with a map of High Ash Farm on it with the names of the fields on. So if you're interested, and it's a really appropriate present time coming up towards the end of December, it would make a lovely gift for somebody who may follow our podcast, and it just adds a little bit more. So each week I try and mention which field we're on or which area of woodland we're on, and it's just really nice thing to do, and it's really good quality, and you can be posted. I think you have to go onto the High Ash Farm Facebook page to actually view where they're available from.
That's a lovely map, and it's sort of an artistic representation, and some of the animals. Chris, the sound of some of your favourite birds.
Matthew, it's one of the success stories for conservation at High Ash Farm. The house sparrows, one of those red list species, declined by 50% or more, and we have over 100 here. It's a huge smile on my face.
Chattering sparrows, just one of the sounds that you can hear on the High Ash Farm podcast. But we need a favour.
Yes, we do. We're asking for donations and any help that you can give to help keep the podcast going.
You can make a monthly or just a one-off payment. highashfarm.com/podcast.
Well done, Matthew.
Well.
Yes, where we see particular birds or the deer on the farm as well. So I brought us on to Arming Hall Field now.
So you can find it on the map.
Yes.
Arming Hall Field.
And we're on the south end of it. And this is the area where last summer we had literally thousands of bee orchids, and then about 2 to 3 weeks later I was shocked that we had pyramidal orchids here as well. It's quite a steep hill with clay on the top, and the soil is eroded off and left almost some of the chalk, the marl soil here, and it's absolutely superb. It goes diagonally across the hillside here, the clay with the chalk in it, so it's high calcium soil, and it's perfect for those two orchid species. And we're coming up to the shortest day, December the 21st, which I've already mentioned. We're just in the beginning of December tomorrow, and the orchids are here. I walk the fields regularly all across the farm, and I was absolutely shocked to see what's happened and this time of the year and why they're here, because it's nowhere near flowering time. Let me just go down on my hands and knees and I'll show you what I mean, because I was trained at college to identify weeds in arable crops in order, and shamefaced Skinner is crushing my face up in embarrassment, in order to kill everything, particularly poppies, all the arable weeds that you can have. But in so doing I learnt all the different species. It's kind of second nature to me. So when I walk along looking at the ground as farmers do, I can sort of get a picture of the soil type and the type of plants that are growing here. But this week I walked across this field and I had to stop because, I can see yarrow there, Achilles milfolium. I can see lots of clover, sainfoin. Here's clover here. This is white clover, little trifoliate leaves. And then dotted in amongst them, literally thousands of orchids up already at the beginning of winter. I'll show you what I mean. Look, I'll put my hand on the ground. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and it goes on. 1 or 2 where you are.
These quite attractive leaves, and that's all they are at the moment.
Yes.
That's the beginnings of an orchid.
Yes. Now, what happened last year, because I found tens of thousands of these, you can put a square metre on the ground and get your count, which farmers normally do for their cereal crops. With cereals, you're looking at about 200 cereal plants per square metre. With orchids, I should think I've got 20 plants per square metre minimum across the side of this hill, which gives us a huge population. But these won't necessarily all come into flower, because what they're doing is they're building up their energy before the grass and the other plants get tall around them. It's a double ovoid tuber down in the ground, and it needs to get those tubers to be quite a size big enough to throw up a flowering spike. And once it does that, it flowers on one tuber one year and then will come into flower the following year. But orchids being orchids, they're a bit awkward, as we say in Norfolk, and they don't always flower every year. So some years you can have a profusion of them, particularly with this species that we're looking at here, which are bee orchids. And the next year or two or three get none. But what they're doing is building up their reserves in energy in order, when there's a lot of vegetation here, in order to throw the flower spike up. And just like those fungi spreading the spores, or the hawthorn with the berries that want to be eaten by the birds because they're bright red, and with these the orchids will come into flower and spread this invisible seed out. Either it'll blow off in the wind, but then the seed, because it hasn't got an energy source with it, orchids are a bit unusual. When the seed lands on the ground, I'm calling it a seed, technically it isn't that, it forms a relationship with the fungi in the soil, and they live together and can be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years before the first flowers emerge. So these are here now. They're getting this sunlight, such as we have at this time of the year, absorbing that, and then they may or may not come into flower depending on how old they are. And some of them are literally tiny, little fingernail-sized plants, just tiny, and it's absolutely fascinating. You know, this is all on just one farm. You can see the soil almost looks as though it's been tilled. You can see all these worm casts, and of course, what I can't answer is, when I sowed this field as a wildflower field, I cannot answer if any orchid seed came with the wildflower seeds from old meadows that were harvested elsewhere, or whether these worms, which are down there half a metre or even a metre deep into the soil, bringing up the soil, and therefore the microscopic orchid seed has come up on top. And this field, which was used for growing sugar beet and wheat for nearly a century, the seed has come up from way below.
You'd quite like it to be the latter, wouldn't you?
I would love that, to think that nature can survive what Skinner threw at it right through my farming career. Every chemical under the sun, every heavy piece of machinery, going back to where we started the podcast with the 1940s, the horses working here, then all the years that I started using tractors, and each year or every other year a larger tractor would arrive. The farm workers, and there were many back then working here full time, they shrug their shoulders and sort of shake their finger at this young, itching to go young farmer, saying, "Bigger the tool, bigger the fool," they'd say to me. And eventually, when they all went and retired, I was left almost looking after this whole square mile single-handedly, but using that machinery, and I thought I was king of the world, not realising that I was nothing like it. So there we are. Orchids in December, you couldn't make it up, but there we are. That's where they are, and that's they're doing what orchids do. They're being a bit awkward.
And there are lots of them as well.
Yes, literally hundreds of them. I'll put a few markers around on this hillside so I know where to look, and so I can actually monitor what's happening. But they're growing all over. This isn't just an isolated patch. Once you get the hang of this sort of bluey green colour on the flag leaf of the orchid, one there, a double there, look, and they're all over this hillside.
They seem to disappear into a hole, don't they?
Yes.
In the middle.
Yes, they do. It's the leaves coming up and growing out over the top of themselves. They're prostrate on the ground, and that's the way you sort of make a little bit of territory for yourself. You'll see foxgloves do it. Another plant that grows here at the farm, which is excellent at sort of making its own little spot, if you like. The leaves come up out of the middle, fold over and go onto the ground, and that's teasels, Sarcus phelonium, and they're excellent at that, making their own little habitat. So wherever I walk now, I'm walking along, look, just orchid after orchid. They're absolutely everywhere. I love it. Come on, let's go and answer some questions.
Rat's enjoying himself as well there.
Yes, he's enjoying this trip round the farm this morning, all sorts of different locations, and he's very happy with this arrangement.
Good to see the pond, which was dry a few months ago, is now full of water here.
Yes, and it's been overflowing and running through the valley, so we're beginning to get back to, well, not drought-stricken, but we're still well short of water, and just keeping our fingers crossed that we keep getting these rain events, because I think that's going to have to last us through spring into the summer, and these rainfalls that we're getting at the moment having a chance to soak into the ground and recharge what we call the aquifer.
Well, let's look at the post bag now, and here's one from Janet Stevens, who enjoys the podcast, and that's good to know. My question relates more to gardening, though, than farming. My most expensive tools are a hand fork and a pair of secateurs, though I have a fairly large garden which I'm trying to draw closer to naturalness and wildness. Gardening on very light soil near Bristol, I have many different kinds of herb-type plants. Lavenders, rosemaries, hyssops, also achilleus. I'm puzzled about the cutting back of these. Once I've unhesitatingly trimmed them down after flowering to keep them tight and prevent them developing lots of vulnerable old wood, which would eventually split them apart and lead to replacement. Now I've heard that there are birds which enjoy the seeds and possibly insect habitat amongst the old seed heads. Should I restrain my secateurs?
Yes, temporarily, here at the farm once everything has finished flowering, because we can't get on the ground during the winter months. I'd love to leave it a little bit longer than I do, but we cut and mow and turn to get the seed out onto the ground, all our wildflower fields, and then bale it up to remove the overburden so we keep the fertility low. But on a garden situation, you can leave your plants, particularly your perennials, longer than you are at the moment, and that gives a little bit of cover. Some of the hollow stalks are great for hibernating ladybirds as well. You mentioned Achilles there, that's another great plant. And so if you delay pruning them now until January, February, till the new growth starts, then you're actually doing the wildlife, the local wildlife, a great favour.
Tamsin in Tasmania is one of many who've responded with emails about last week's podcast. We were talking about bird flu, and part of the farm is in an exclusion zone now because of a nearby poultry unit having an outbreak. And Tamsin says, I'm so very sorry to hear about bird flu. Look after yourself so you're best placed to help with the recovery. High ash gives them a fighting chance. It's now reached Tasmanian territories, long way off but anxious about it.
Yes, I've noticed that the bird flu is beginning to spread worldwide now at the moment, and it's really enlightening to hear that it's gone right down to the southern part of the world, and so the virus is now worldwide, and that's what viruses do. They get themselves out and about, but it's sad to hear that it's already got to Tasmania. So thank you for that, Tamsin, and we'll be very careful what we do here in Norfolk.
I have so many international listeners to the podcast. Bonnie is in northern Illinois in the United States. Sorry to hear you're battling the bird flu there in the UK as well. It's been a terrible problem over here, affecting eggs, domestic chickens and turkeys, as well as a lot of wild birds. it seems to be affecting Canada geese and other waterfowl such as ducks in the wild.
Yes, again, it's worldwide, and particularly that Bonnie's mentioned there that some of the large industrial poultry units are suffering hugely, as they are. We've got a number of outbreaks here in Norfolk at the moment, but it's not just locally, it's perhaps these new viruses that are getting about H5N1, this particular one, and several other very closely related viruses are beginning to get themselves out and about, and the thing of it is they're changing their patterns as well, so affecting different bird species. So thank you, Bonnie, and we're very vigilant here at the farm as we're in an exclusion zone here at the moment.
David and Chris send an email along with Flossie the Border Collie. I don't know if Flossie and Rat are acquainted, but probably not. Anyway, they say they were listening with interest about honey fungus. Gave that another mention today, didn't we? But last week we were talking about that very invasive honey fungus on a tree. And they say we're surrounded by farmland and on a strip of uncultivated ground adjacent to our eastern boundary. We have a number of quite low-cut stumps that have been there for 20 years or more, cut down by the previous owner, and this year have had large outcrops of what may be honey fungus. However, I've not been able to establish if there are any bootlaces in the area, as there's no sign of bark left to peel off, as per your mention last week. We also have an old oak in another part of the garden, which is very dead, and also gets a fungus of similar type at this time of year at ground level. So basically, I think the question is here, would it still be visible?
And not necessarily. Now, the interesting thing with honey fungus is it sometimes only produces those bootlaces, which gives it its other name, the bootlace fungus, and doesn't always behave. And the other problem of identification of honey fungus is the actual fruiting bodies can vary hugely in shape and in colour and in number as well, so you can have whole clusters of them that are of a completely different colour. So the key is that there's no control for honey fungus. It affects the inner heartwood of the tree, and when the fungus wants to reproduce, will produce the fruiting bodies on the outside of the tree, which we saw earlier this autumn on a previous podcast. So it's such an unpredictable science, and you have no idea if any of your favourite trees are going to succumb to it, because there's no actual treatment for it.
And Susan Thomas is also in the States, living in Nashville, Tennessee, and enjoys the podcast, and particularly enjoyed about your explanation of how the government programs that you were a member of has gradually changed over the years, and how you've taken things on.
Yes, I've sort of gripped it as best I could as a former intensive arable farmer. And that was always very exacting to grow crops and to produce the wildlife here, and to halt and reverse the decline of many of the species that spend their life here at the farm. I've had to learn a lot about what they require rather than what we think they require. And she sent us a wonderful picture of a barred owl, and it looks very similar to one of our tawny owls. And she's saying at the end of the email, just thank you for making me more aware and observing the wildlife that I share my part of the world with, and thank you very much for that. So lovely to hear from you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan, for sharing something in your neighbourhood there. Magnificent looking bird.
Yes.
Keep the emails coming in, we love to read them. And that's almost it for another week,
yes,
Chris. In December, and a certain event's coming up soon.
Yes, I know. The time is just flashing past. I can't believe we've been podcasting for a great many episodes now, and the time's just flying. I always think we're going to run out of topics, and it almost seems the opposite is happening. And this is just one farm, a square mile of Norfolk countryside, and I just can't wait for next week's episode. Do join us then.